embracing agility, managers can make or break. Okay, and if you see the left-hand side, this is the crux of this discussion is about what is the real role of managers in the agile world, and what is the importance of the managers and embracing agility, how are they related and things like that. And okay, so let me move on with the first slide here. So like I did last time when I presented on Scrum Masters, I have a small note and a request to make for the participants. And here is the note. The experience shared here and the discussion that happens here is based on a collection of my experience working as a team member, manager, and a coach in both software and non-software projects throughout my career. But most of the insight I have gathered and presented here is a result of my careful study and experimentation with martial arts teams and several social engineering initiatives. Right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about what my martial arts experiments were and also the social engineering whenever there is an appropriate time. But what I'm trying to highlight here is that most of my detailed study and learnings is actually from non-software world. And although I was able to apply most of the learnings that I had outside the non-software world in the software industry, and sometimes vice versa, I also had a few good learnings in the software industry as well. But mostly it's in the non-software world, and there is a good reason why I got this kind of a learning, and we will figure that out soon. Okay, so that's why from the ideas and the thoughts point of view, which are presented here, I would like to attribute this to my sensei. We call my martial arts teacher as sensei in Japanese, and also my mentor in social engineering space. I'm working with a mentor on several engagements. I would like to attribute this material to them. And so as usual, you're free to use this, and if you'd like to share also, you're free, but please have a courtesy to take the written permission from me, because some of the ideas, as I mentioned, are really attributed to my sensei and mentor. And let's be ethical. That's a small request. Okay, so let's jump in. Antara has briefly introduced me, and if any of you were present in my last webinar on Scrum Mastership, you would probably know me. But as a quick thing, I'm Jayaprakash Puttaswamy. You can call me JP. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an agile strategist and coach working on various agile transformation engagements in different, wearing different hats. I've been practicing agile from past 11 years now, and I've used various flavors like Scrum, XP, Kanban, along with lean principles. So I've trained and coached over 600 professionals spread across 80+ teams, roughly in about 20+ organizations. And my recent experience also has been in helping large-scale transformation in various global enterprises, the scale ranging from 200 to 4,000 people. Okay, and the last point I wanted to highlight was that I have recognized throughout this work as a coach and a consultant some of my key strengths which are enabling me to do this, and also see some pretty good success in what I'm doing and what my clients are doing. And they include my self-awareness about knowing about my own limitations, my constraints, my strengths and weakness, and the kind of people connect that I've learned over a period of time, how to establish good people connect, and a little bit of servant leadership skills and strategic management skills. These are the ones which are helping me perform my role in the Agile transformation space. Okay, so enough of me, and I'm more interested also to know about the present set of participants. So can we get a quick poll of what kind of roles the people who are right now present are playing in their organizations? Antara, can you help us?
Yeah.
So we could ask a simple question out of the participants. I want to know how many managers are present. If you're a manager, please type yes, and we can just quickly see the count.
Sure. So we have, I think we have quite a few responses which come our way as yes as the answer to your question, JP.
So that's good. And so let's begin with this question, which says, what does a manager do? Right? Let me clarify you. I'm not asking what should a manager do or what should a manager focus on and things like that. I'm just asking a plain simple question on what does a manager do? So guys, just type in what does a manager do?
Manage people and help people to overcome their limitations. That's Nishchit for you. We have Sumanta as well with his inputs. He says it's about balancing the competing demands of quality, scope, time, and cost.
Okay, so I'm also trying to type it here so that others can also see what we are answering. So someone said manage people, and someone said balance. Could you repeat that, please, Antara?
Balancing the competing demands of quality, scope, time, and cost.
Oh, okay. We're talking about the standard iron triangle. Okay, competing demand of quality, scope, and time. Yeah,
and cost.
This is the delicate balance they are trying to do. Yes, yeah, and cost. Yeah.
There is Jasdev who says manage self, team, motivate them towards the team goals, ensure that the team works as one, define performance goals, and provide feedback to individuals. That's Jasdev.
Oh, that's right. That's a good set of thoughts collected by Jasdev.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes. There is Balaji writing that he is the bridge between management and team.
Okay.
Prashant writes
between.
Yes, the management and the team. We have Prashant here. He says he manages his team in terms of their aspirations, goals, and of course delivery to meet stakeholders' needs and put in performance feedback.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's cool. I'm not writing the other points since they are covered by the others, and managing delivery is another aspect that has come out newly. That's a good collection of thoughts. Let me also see whatever I had in mind, in my observation, my experience, if they matched. Okay, so as a manager, you got to manage resources. Someone said manage people. That's a wonderful thought. But I'm just stating managing resources. And act as a conduit between teams and stakeholders. Someone talked about it. Act as a bridge between the management and the team. I'm calling stakeholders. Someone who plans and tracks. Manages risks, and lead projects or initiatives, okay, depending on whether it's a project manager, delivery manager, program manager, and things like that, and provides guidance and direction. I was actually surprised. There's only one person who talked about motivating, inspiring, and things like that. So obviously the points most of you made is also mapping with some of these that I had observed in my career. But some of the points, especially the ones which came last, leading an initiative, providing guidance and direction, right? I have question marks next to them if you really notice. Okay, and let me bring the last point that I had in my mind. It's about developing people. Okay, so, and I've also highlighted with double question mark and green in color. Okay, so the reason why I've done this is whenever I speak to my clients, the teams that I coach, the management people, the executives during consulting and coaching, when we talk about the role of manager, responsibility of manager, I hardly get to hear anyone speaking about people. Most of the answers would be revolving around this left-hand side. Managing resources. Of course, most of the people would also include people as human resources. So by default, when they say manage resources, they're talking about everyone, including the people, human resource. And most of the answers revolve around plans, planning and tracking, monitoring, managing the risk, acting as conduit or bridge between the stakeholders. And very few people talk about providing guidance or direction, and also people have their own interpretation of leading a project or leading an initiative. So most of the people that I've encountered think that leading a project essentially means that you are the single point of authority to the project and you control a lot of things on scheduling, scope, and even in the budget constraints, and you direct people on various fine-tuned activities on almost as per a plan, right? And as long as you're doing that pretty well and able to manage risk, that's what people refer to as leading projects or initiatives, which is definitely right. There is nothing wrong with that. But what I've also seen some of the other managers leading, they slightly look at that slightly differently. But I've hardly ever heard from managers who says developing people, right? Of course, I'm not saying there are no managers at all, but I'm saying relatively low response for this aspect. Okay, let's keep this thought in mind. Now let's go to the next section. I want to read this in a couple of minutes. Okay, now let's focus on what should the manager focus on. Okay, my previous question was, what does a manager do? And I also asked you to just answer based on your general observation in a day-to-day life. But if you really think, okay, some of the responsibilities, some of the focus areas, so we are not really debating on whether a manager should do this or not. So this point is focusing on, there could be n number of activities and responsibilities, but as an effective manager, what should a manager focus on? And I want to again know the pulse of the audience here. So can you guys start typing or speaking about it?
Chit writes,
Okay.
give time to listen to people and help to overcome their problems. That's Nishchit. And
That's a wonderful
Prashant,
thought. Okay.
yeah, so Prashant writes here, all the time understanding the pulse of his or her team to keep up the motivation levels. Sumanta writes, stakeholders, just
Okay.
one word. There is Balaji.
Okay.
Pardon my voice, I have a bad throat, it seems. Balaji writes, relate himself to the team and listen to and get involved with the team and keep the team happy, same way manage deliverables. Jasdev
Sure.
has an opinion, working towards meeting organizational goals, ensure on-time delivery of projects and or programs, manage stakeholders' expectations, and develop the team.
Right. That's cool. So I think we have a pretty good collection of thoughts
Sure.
there.
Sure.
And so as you, most of you guys rightly spotted, right? So some people talked about relating themselves to people, motivating them, focusing on people, and some people also highlighted just focus on stakeholders, meeting organizational goals, and some people even said try to do a balance, which goes back to the similar point that Sumanta made earlier, which is about balancing the competing demand of quality, scope, and cost. Okay, may not be that. I think there's one more. I just heard when you spoke, balancing between managing deliverables and the people. So if you really see here, we have this mixed opinion on focus, right? Some people are are suggesting that managers should really focus on people. Some of them are really suggesting that you should really focus on organizational goals, meeting project deliverables, and things like that. And a couple of them talking about balancing between them. Right? This is the crux. This is the crux of the entire topic. Embracing agility managers can make or break is very closely related to this mixed understanding on the focus. Okay? I'm not again talking about what is right or wrong in responsibilities. I'm talking about focus of a manager. Okay, so let me move on now with the next couple of slides and then see how we can relate these concepts we discussed so far. Okay, so let me share my thoughts, which I've gathered as a part of my experience. So, managing limited resources efficiently, setting expectations, providing direction and guidance, focusing on outcomes, anticipating and mitigating risk, and holding people accountable, tracking and monitoring transparently, and setting and living values. Okay, these are some of the major points that I've gathered, learned, experienced, failed to actually focus on these aspects and learn from the lessons, and also heard from my clients, the teams, the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily in the software industry. As I mentioned in the beginning, most of this comes from non-software industry when I worked with the virtual teams. Okay, so at this point, I think it makes sense to just talk about what is that non-software team that I'm talking about, just to give you a context. I've been working on various social engineering initiatives. What I mean by social engineering is working on some of the aspects which are related to the society, the community in which we live in relation to the public policies, the quality of education, and the general politics and the public administration and things like that. In this particular space, there are a lot of engineering aspects which require very good participation from the society, from the people like you and me. And I've been working with various people, various teams, NGOs who are driving certain initiatives, certain campaigns in building a better society. And all these things I'm working with virtual teams who are folks like you and me who have a passion towards doing this, taking extra time and commitment from their personal time without getting any salary for this, because it's not a regular job, but they are working only purely out of passion. So I've learned a lot of management, a lot of leadership aspects, and a lot of working the team concepts out of those teams. So let me just bring in the last point here again, which I wanted to highlight, which is about understanding and developing people. Okay, so let me spend a couple of minutes on these points, and then I would like to seek the participants' opinion on these points. So if you really see, any manager, of course, he would have been hired, or he would have been given, or he or she would have been given responsibility of managing something, right? Usually, if it is a commercial organization, profitable organization, it is definitely to do manage projects, manage program initiatives, or manage entire portfolio, or manage the entire company, or a division, right? So obviously, that has got to do with managing your limited resources efficiently and also effectively, right? So the moment you shift, the moment you link the resources, the efficiency of the resources usage, and the outcome, you also get related to effectiveness, right? It's not about using your resources just efficiently and without really caring about the actual outcome. So managing limited resources that we have invariably in every project or every initiative, and then transforming the effort and energy and the skills into meaningful outcomes of the project. That's the primary focus of any manager. Let's acknowledge that, right? That's a primary focus. And in doing so, one of the other important aspects that a manager needs to take care is about anticipating and mitigating risk, because we are living in a very highly dynamic world, very changing world, very complex world of projects, software, people, etc. And there could be a lot of things that could go wrong, and anticipating and mitigating risk is another important aspect of a manager. I mean, if you claim that you're a manager, and if you're unable to use the limited resources efficiently, and if you can't anticipate and mitigate risk, and if you can't relate your work and translate into meaningful outcomes, we have failed as a basic manager, right? That's the primary thing. Now, apart from this, when it comes to managing project or initiatives or even a product which has to be developed or worked by a set of people, there are a few other things in terms of setting the expectation, right, which also includes aligning the organizational goals, aligning the program initiative goals, aligning the project goals with the team's goal and the individual's goals eventually, right? That's what is nothing but that's what is the meaning of setting expectations, and then providing direction and guidance constantly, because most of the times there is a tendency of people or teams going off track due to various constraints, environmental reasons, and you have to ensure that they are in the right direction, and guidance to be provided to maintain the direction. And also, because we're talking about working together, and there is no free lunch, so a lot of people, team members, it's a natural human tendency that we take things for granted, and generally people don't hold themselves accountable naturally. That's what is the observation, at least. So hence, if someone is claiming to be a manager or leader, you have to have the ability of holding people accountable, right? And also, of course, tracking and monitoring. But tracking and monitoring transparently, this point is related to holding people accountable, because the moment you don't have mechanisms to track and monitor things transparently in an objective manner, accountability takes its own route or its own forms of what do you say? What can I say? The accountability is just not there, and people don't have enough motivation to be accountable when transparency is missing. Now, apart from this, if you are a person who's managing, who's driving certain things, and if we cannot set and live the values, some of the fundamental values that are needed to work together as a team, it's very difficult to expect a similar thing from the team members. Now, again, I have highlighted one point, which is again in green color, which talks about understanding and developing people. In my previous slide, the point was, so let me just go back so that you can see here. As a manager, we should really focus on developing people, right? And here, I have again written in the focus area called understanding and developing people, right? So by now, hopefully you should have got some questions in your mind about what am I trying to say, or some of you would have guessed or understood what I'm trying to talk about. Do you have any comments to make at this point of time?
So there is just Dave asking, how do you hold people accountable? Prashant is asking, you mean people are critical and we should take care of them?
Okay. Okay. So the two questions are around, are you meaning to say that people are most critical out of all the resources that you mentioned, and also because they're people, how do you hold them accountable?
True. That's true.
Okay. 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 Those are some good questions, tough questions to answer and understand, but it's not that tough if you really focus on these aspects and try and understand. So let's spend some more time, and hopefully we should get an answer towards the end of this talk. So I'll try to answer this as and when I move forward.
One more statement coming our way from Balaji.
Mm-hmm.
If manager thinks about understanding and developing people,
Yep.
the other things mentioned in slides will get accomplished. That's the statement.
So what Balaji is trying to say is, if manager, out of various things that he or she has in her bucket, if he or she focuses on understanding developing people, a lot of other things will get done automatically. That's a wonderful statement and thought. Yeah. So you're true, Balaji, and then we'll see how that's going to happen. Okay. Okay. So I have another slide where I want to highlight about the typical titles that we see in our day-to-day work, right? Whether it's software, non-software, mostly in software, this particular slide highlights. So we have project managers, delivery manager, product manager, engagement manager, program manager, account manager, portfolio manager, and so on and so forth. So do you guys have any special thing to add here? So I'm talking about typical titles here. So unless it's a typical common one that you heard,
there is test manager.
You don't have to add to this list, or okay, test manager. Yes. So of course the development manager, test manager, but mostly they'll be either responsible for managing the project or managing the delivery. So they are somehow related to that. Okay.
Balaji says people manager.
Yeah, people manager. Okay, that's another interesting title we have. I have seen too in various companies, especially in IBM. There's this concept of matrix organization where you have people manager separate and technical manager separate, and each person has to report to both of them like a matrix, where your people manager will take care of people management needs and technical manager will take care of managing the work and the project. Right. So you guys are true about the titles. Okay, so for the purpose of my discussion and also for simplicity, let's focus on project manager, program manager, and portfolio manager. Okay, I'm not really going to get into any of the management titles related to product because I would like to do this as a separate session around product owner role and maybe the product management roles and things like that. But here let's focus on people who are related to the deliverables and the people and the teams and things like that. Not really about the product. Managing product itself is a different topic altogether, and we're not going to talk about it. Okay, so let's look at some interesting facts which comes from PMI. What does PMI say about project managers? If you really see or read, and let me read it for the convenience of others, it says who are project managers, and there's a whole bunch of statements here. They go like this. They are organized, passionate, and goal-oriented who understand what projects have in common and their strategic role in how organizations succeed, learn, and change. Project managers are change agents. They take project goals their own, they make project goals their own and use their skills and expertise to inspire a sense of shared purpose within the project team. They enjoyed the organization adrenaline of new challenges and the responsibility of driving business results. They work well under pressure and are comfortable with change and complexity in dynamic environments. They can shift readily between the big picture and the small but crucial details, knowing when to concentrate on each. We're talking about pulling and deep diving and pulling out. And the next para says, project managers cultivate the people skills needed to develop trust and communication among all of a project stakeholders, sponsors, those who will make use of the project's results, those who command the resources needed, and the project team members. Right? And then it goes on. Stressing this, irrespective of when they have recorded here, they are talking about project managers being change agents. project managers being the ones who are comfortable with change and complexity in dynamic environment. They're talking about someone who would cultivate people's skill, develop the trust and communication among all of the project stakeholders, right? Do you see any relation of these thoughts with what Agile asks for in terms of leaders like Scrum Master and those kind of roles? Right, and even working the Agile way, we talk about change, which talk about Scrum Masters when they are highly effective, actually end up becoming change agents in the overall organization, who could actually bring policy changes, cultural changes to bring in agility. And you're talking about managers being comfortable with change, open to change, and focusing on cultivating the people's skill. These are definitely the points which are related to what Agile is trying to address, right? So let me proceed with that thought in mind. My next point, it's again from PMI. What does PMI say about other managers? This is again an expert from PMI website. They talk about project managers found in every kind of organization's employees, managers, contractors, independent consultants. And they also say with experience they may end up becoming program managers responsible for multiple related projects, or portfolio managers responsible for selection, prioritization, and alignment of projects and programs within an organization's strategy. Right? So what do you guys observe here about program managers and portfolio managers, and do you see any relationship with Agile here?
One.
Okay.
All these roles are related to Agile Project Management. That's Balaji.
Sure, that's wonderful. So in fact, just to add to what Balaji said, if you really see here, portfolio manager, for example, responsible for selection, prioritization, and alignment of projects and programs, right? Now, just for the simplicity, we can even relate this to the way the product development work, right? Obviously, for developing a major product and making profit out of it, there would be a lot of initiatives around the product development, and some of them actually get executed as projects. Some of them actually become the core product development. Some of them become certain initiatives around certain centers of excellence and things like that. So let's not get into this confusion of product and project, and they're different and things like that. Eventually, everything boils down to certain execution by the team, whether it's product development or project execution, it doesn't matter. Right? Now, if you really see here, portfolio manager, selection, prioritization, alignment of projects and programs with an organization strategy. Who does this in the Agile world? It's mostly supposed to be done by the product owners in collaboration with the other stakeholders, right? Product owners from the Scrum point of view. So, if you really observe again, whatever responsibilities that the PMI is defining, they are all related to what we're speaking in Agile. Okay, then what's the problem, right? What's the confusion about management and manager role? Now, here is my next point which talks about that. Unfortunately, I have encountered only one manager till now in my career who really lived the values and displayed the characteristics identified by PMI. Whatever we just saw in the last two slides, including this one, I have rarely seen, at least in my around 12 years of career, I have only seen one manager who really lived these values and displayed all the characteristics identified by PMI. Okay, and if there were really more, then there was no need of a jargon called Agile. Okay, but you know what? That is just my experience. It could be a little different. You would have seen more people who are doing this who are not related to Agile at all. So again, I want to hear your experience. Have you seen many guys who actually fulfill all the responsibilities that are listed out there in the PMI in the non-Agile world?
The answer
Okay.
coming from Balaji.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to say very rare in stuff say no, because there are few guys. I mean, I would have seen just one manager. I'm pretty sure here the set of participants would have seen a couple of them, but generally the percentage is low. Okay, so I'll try to focus on why that is the case, right? So let me proceed here. So before I go about the actual slides, which are going to relate whatever we discussed so far with Agile and Agility, just as a one-liner, as you actually rightly pointed out and listed out in the beginning, there are so many responsibilities that a manager needs to go through in a day-to-day work. Some of them are oriented towards focused towards people. Some of them are to do with the other resources, and some of them are mostly related to the deliverables, the outcomes, and then of course there are a lot of things which have to deal with organizational constraints, your impediments, your problems, and sometimes people are seem to be problems, right, for most of the people. So there are so many things, and it's very easy to get distracted, to get lost, or to get stuck in trying to solve certain things and easily lose focus on what a manager should focus on.
JP, here I would just like to highlight Sumanta is actually writing a few comments here.
Sure, please.
So to your previous question, so
yes, please.
The answer is first of all, he says no. At times that is not practical even with the best of intents. It could be attributed to external factors like lack of formal project management practices in the organization.
Okay, that's cool. That's good. Okay, so you're true, Sumanta. So one is about practical constraints, and the other one is about lack of good project management practices. Now, in fact, I would even relate them to PMI practices. PMI practices, what we just read, which are listed out there, are definitely good project management practices, but the only difficulty is in practicing, and obviously due to various constraints. Now, constraints are related to, again, some more managers. They could be your pool of managers and their managers and their managers and so on until the executives of the organization, right? It could be the whole system where there are constraints which do not really allow you to focus on certain things, but with Agile, we are going to get an opportunity to decrease those constraints and really focus on what we need to focus on a manager. So we're going to talk about this in detail in next few slides. Okay, so let me proceed here. So let's look at whatever we are speaking about, the role of managers and agility, right? So in my experience of learning, failing, learning, and improving in the working with managers, working with team members, one of the first important realization that I've had about Agile managers who need to have or develop this realization is this. Everything is a dumb resource as far as a manager is concerned, except people. People are people with emotions, with feelings and choices. This is the first realization that an Agile manager gets. So if you really go back and ask anyone or ask yourself, if you're a manager, what are some of the typical resources that you manage? You just go on listing, right? The budget, the skilled people, the human resources. The first thing, sometimes the obvious answer comes is people, and then the infrastructure, the budget, whatever, right? Various examples of resources. But Agile managers try and realize that there is a need for us to distinguish between other dumb resources. I think there's a typo here. Instead of dumb, I've typed dump. So that's a dumb resource. Let me just type it. There's a difference between dumb resources and the people who are the human resources. First realization. Okay, let me go to the next one. Second important realization that Agile managers need to have or develop, if they don't have, is this. Apart from recognizing people as people, agility can only be embraced by investing significant time in understanding and developing those people. Okay, as managers, we can embrace the agility only by investing significant portion of our time. Out of all the responsibilities that we talked about, significant time should be focused on understanding and developing those people who we recognize as people, right? These are the two important realizations that I've seen successful agile managers have gone through. Okay, and also in agile world, it's relatively easy to get the first one. That means realizing people as people, at least distinguishing them. But most managers fail in doing the second one, which is spending enough time, balancing the time with understanding and developing people versus all other responsibilities, which are important, but all other responsibilities. So balancing the time between this particular aspect and the rest of the things, right? That's what distinguished a regular manager, or probably a manager who's struggling to work in the agile space versus an agile manager who's an effective manager. Okay, so let's spend a couple of minutes more in understanding those two phrases, what I really mean by understanding people and developing people. And if you really understand the detailed points which are related to them, I'm sure you'll appreciate why these two aspects require more time, more quality time of manager compared to all other responsibilities. Okay, understanding people involves understanding self. It starts with understanding self, being aware of our own limitations, strengths and weakness, goals, constraints, etc. Understanding people's limitations. So what the first point was about self, and the second one is understanding about people's limitations, the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. It could be at a project level, program level, portfolio level, or whatever level. Understanding people's limitations, their intent, their motivation factor, their capability, their potential to do something else if the constraints are removed, or if the situation is improved, do they have a potential, and to what potential do they have, right? Understanding about them and knowing a little bit of personal aspects and developing a personal connect with the people we work with, people we manage. Building credibility and developing a relation of trust by walking the talk, simply by walking the talk, right? That is the only way, easiest way, and most natural way to build credibility and developing a trust-related relationship. And supporting people on their difficult times, protecting them, and setting outcome-based expectations. Not the activity-based expectations, not the effort-based expectation, but outcome-based expectation, and identifying ways to measure people objectively against those expectations. And if you really notice in the bracket, in the ways, I've mentioned those ways may vary from person to person, right? Setting expectation and measuring them objectively could, the way in which we do this could vary from person to person, depending on how deep our understanding is about that person, right? There is no one size fits all, and unfortunately that is where most of the people fail to do this, right? So let's reflect on these points. Understanding people involves understanding about self, understanding about people's limitation, intent, motivation, and knowing or having a personal connect, building credibility over a period of time, which cannot happen suddenly, and then supporting people on the difficult times because they are people with emotions and stuff like that. And then setting the right expectation related to deliverable, identifying how we measure them transparently, objectively, and how we hold people accountable, right? So as someone rightly pointed, I think Balaji sometime back, if we really focus here, then we can do a better resource management. We can do a better risk management, because a lot of risk associated with projects, a lot of aspects associated with efficiency, productivity of the projects, and then the usage of the resources, the success rate, delivery, on-time delivery. It all boils down to the people who are working on them, because it's not the resources constraint. It is actually the people's constraint. People's inability, capabilities, potential, right? Without really having a deeper understanding of this, there is no way we can fulfill the other responsibilities very effectively in a predictable manner. Okay, that's why this is a very important aspect. And Agile managers really recognize the importance of this. I'm speaking from my real experience of interacting with people who have succeeded, both in software and non-software world again. Now, and also the last point was building rapport to provide candidate feedback. Yes, Antara?
Yeah, so there is Ashish actually commenting and agreeing with you and saying that it's true. As per PMI, approximately 18% of a project manager's time is spent communicating, and communication is all about people. And if the managers put effort in understanding and developing people around them, then half of the project issues can be avoided. Yeah, so that's
yes, you're true. In fact, all the issues can be avoided because all the issues get created and get creeped up and remain as issues if we don't really understand people, right? Because we are working with people, not the robots and the machines. So you're true, Ashish, there. So
Jasdev basically writes that in terms of people, changing the mindset of people in a lot of areas is often a challenge. That's something that he has pointed out.
I'm actually going to speak about that. Yeah. Changing mindset, holding people accountable, establishing transparent culture. All these things are definitely tough but possible with a shift in our orientation, in our focus when it comes to the management. And it's very closely related to the leadership aspects, right, that every manager is supposed to cultivate. Okay, so I'm going to link this and talk about that towards the end. Okay, so let me proceed here in the interest of time. So my next point was about developing people. Okay, so first one was understanding, and the next one is developing people. So taking calculated risk and working on people's strengths. Okay, I'm talking about taking calculated risk because there is an inherent risk when you shift your focus on people, developing them, understanding. There are deliverables which are actually sometimes might go for a toss is what is the common opinion, and hence I'm calling this as a calculated risk. It's a fine-tuned balance between how much time we need to dedicate on developing people versus working with the existing people as is, but really working on their strengths, okay, rather than cribbing about their incapability or weaknesses, right? They go hand in hand. And acquiring the skill of working with average people and leveraging their complete potential. Okay, this is a skill. This is an acquired skill. It doesn't come naturally to any of us. It's a delicate balance which requires how do we make things happen with limited people, limited resources, average people, right? If you're given all the excellent heroes, all the experts, and if all the resources that you need, you can probably execute the projects much better. But the world is not like that, and it's all with average people, common people, but who have a very strong intent, good intention, and commitment, right? How do we leverage their complete potential and balance? And then pushing people to boundaries. Sometimes we may need to push people to boundaries without disturbing the work-life balance. This is the key there, right? It's very easy to push someone and ask them to come on a weekend or slog in the late night. But then, are we really focusing on the work-life balance? Are we really caring about them? May not be, right? So that's a delicate balance again. And aligning individuals' goals and aspirations with that of organizations, that of projects or programs. Mentoring and leading by example. Inspiring and influencing to enhance capacity of people, right? So this is again a newer understanding of the Agile managers, that the capacity word needs to be redefined. Okay, there is nothing called just the capacity of people. Capacity would be there, of course, but it can be enhanced. This is another realization that Agile managers do by influencing and inspiring people to enhance their own capacity, because every person has got that ability within the person. We just need to touch that and awake that awareness, right? As sensible managers, as agile managers. So, if you really observe all the bullets that I've listed here about developing people requires a lot of skills that we ourselves need to acquire as manager, and strike a balance between focusing on developing people's, enhancing their capacity versus the deliverables, versus the project work, day-to-day work. And we may have to take calculated risks, and we should know how to work on people's strengths, leverage those strengths to their maximum. And then most of the times when you talk about influencing, enhancing capacity, we have to lead by example, right? That could be another source of motivation, and sometimes it requires very good mentoring, right, and guidance. Based on our past experience, our hands-on experience background, we may have to get hands-on to demonstrate certain thing, or we may have to mentor people to go extra mile, right? It cannot happen through force or formula or whatever, right? You cannot have a magical formula. Okay, so here is my slide which talks about the role clarity and the possible mappings that a manager in the Agile world can get and do, right? Can get a clarity and then possible mapping. So again, I'm going to restrict my points with those 3 roles that we discussed, because those will map to most of the management roles in any large organization. So project manager, in fact, a lot of this discussion and the knowledge may not be needed even for a small project or a small company, because there a lot of things are agile in nature. They have to be agile. There is no other way. The complexity or the need only arises when the projects grow and the organizations grow, teams grow, number of people grow, and also the impediments and the constraints also grow, sometimes exponentially, and that's where it becomes difficult, and that's where we need this focus. So project managers should really get clarity and focus on building self-organized teams, and a lot of things that we really need to do as a manager would be taken care of by the self-organized teams themselves. We need to focus on building such teams. That means on people, and people will take care of certain aspects of productivity, building quality, and using things efficiently and things like that. The moment we say they are self-organized, they are supposed to take care, so that it allows our precious time to focus on developing themselves rather than getting into the nitty-gritties. Empowering people to manage their day-to-day work. That means there's the same point which just goes back to the first point, but clearly a shift in the focus is what I'm trying to highlight. And most of the times when we talk about innovation, the highest quality and things like that in Agile, it cannot happen by magic. It can only happen by careful consideration, careful act of managers by creating space and flexibility to enable people's experimentation and growth. That means there should be a slack in the system. Typical managers go with the lens of who's underutilized, who's less than 100%, let me load the person with the work, let me load the team with the work. That really doesn't help, and that really doesn't work in Agile. You have to create space, you have to create a slack where people can experiment, relax, and really talk about innovation, or really talk about improvements themselves, and self-organize and implement, keeping the goals in mind. Creating the space is an important responsibility and the focus of the manager, project manager. Creating and nurturing a culture that supports transparency and accountability. Focusing on risk management using people-inclusive approach. That means if we really want to manage risk well, we have to include inputs from the people who are working on it, right? It's not just a dashboard report that I just pull in offline and try to make my own interpretation and take some decisions in isolation, which is definitely not going to work to manage the whole risk. And that is a real emphasis on true collaboration between everyone involved in the Agile space. It is only to do a better risk management. Okay, and in terms of program managers, aligning program goals and initiative goals with project goals. Focusing on enabling cross-team collaboration, because when I talk about program, there are multiple teams working for a similar initiative. Enabling the cross-team collaboration and resolving dependencies as a program manager is the key to tap that energy. And the building relationship of trust and developing leaders. So here is where our span of control as a program manager, we lose it once we go beyond a few teams, and there is no way other than developing leaders and delegating certain things. I see a message being typed. Okay, sure. Okay, so we have about 10 more minutes, and we want to just move a little faster. Yes. So last few slides are just pictures, so I think we are good from that point of view. So collaborating with enablers, with key enablers like managers and scrum masters. So from a program manager point of view, our key enablers are the actual managers who are working on the projects and the scrum master, really about Agile. All the clarity and mapping I'm talking about is about an Agile manager. So obviously we can leverage roles like Scrum Masters and Manager to really collaborate well and to do the other 3 points that I mentioned before. And developing a simple and effective consolidation methods and transparent dashboard. When it comes to program, we need a good dashboard, but we cannot live with the old dashboard with 150 metrics and 150 KPIs there. It has to be a simple and it has to be a transparent dashboard. Right? That's the focus of a program manager. And then lastly, portfolio managers, which definitely has to do with aligning the organization or portfolio vision with programs and the projects. And obviously here also it requires a great deal of collaboration with the key decision makers like product owners, directors, stakeholders, etc. So this is where a portfolio manager, an Agile portfolio manager's focus should be on these aspects, right? So I'm trying to rush through because I have another slide which summarizes everything. So the original title of this the webinar, Embracing Agility and Managers, right? So I talked about making and breaking. So those who make this embracing part are the ones who clearly distinguish between the dumb resources and the people, and focus the time and energy on understanding and developing people, spends time on understanding self and developing leadership skills, which are definitely needed to do a lot of things which we spoke about, right? Establishing a culture, building a culture, holding people accountable. Again, that goes back to culture, requires leadership skills, not just mere management skills. And then focusing on creating a culture of transparency and accountability. These are the characteristics of the manager who make, in other words, who are successful in embracing agility. And these are some of the characteristics of the managers who fail in the agile world, who, in other words, who break this agility part. They really start worrying more about their own titles and power. They focus more on protecting their authority because they have the insecurity, and in the process they end up developing rigidity and insecurity in the teams and in themselves. And also often to protect their assets, they start engaging in unhealthy debates and rumors and things like that. They get into the dirty political management aspects, and they end up misusing certain metrics and try to display some of the wrong or modified metrics, and then try to retrofit Agile itself or any process and then expect magic about it without really focusing on the other aspects that I mentioned on the left-hand side. This is where Agile managers or managers in the Agile world fail if you really end up doing these kind of activities. Okay, so I don't know if I think Antara, maybe 5 or 6 minutes are left for challenges. So
yes, so
to discuss some challenges before we get into discussion, I thought I'll just show my connection details for people who want to leave, because we really want to respect their time, and if they want to leave, they're free to leave. Here's my contact details. You can get in touch with me. And for those who are about to leave, I just want to show you a last thought, right? We have to remember that management of any kind starts with managing self and continues with understanding others, especially people. This is the thought that I wanted all of us to carry back to our work. And okay, so it's time for a little bit of any other questions or thoughts. And thank you very much for actually participating and taking your precious time to have this discussion. So, so as a conclusory remark, what I wanted to really say was this, right? So PMI or a lot of agile concepts are actually common sense, as most of you recognize. And even PMI has made a significant effort to highlight this. But the real failure is in executing them, and most of the execution failures are attributed to our lack of understanding of those PMI principles, PMI values, and also agile values and things like that. People often get stuck in the practices and not really focus on values and principles. Right? That's the primary reason. And the second thing is, whatever effective points we talked about from the management point of view and mapping ourselves in the agile world require more than management skills. They require a little bit of leadership skills and people orientation. So if we can get this with various, there are a lot of education sources available to orient ourselves on people and the leadership aspects. If we can imbibe them and then really know how to distinguish between what are some of the mundane activities that a manager needs to do and what are some of the second quadrant activities where from the long-term point of view a manager need to focus. If we can distinguish these, I think it will not be that difficult, and I've seen many cases where it's success, and I've also seen success myself in working on these initiatives. So that was the last point I wanted to convey. Thank you all.
In the
And,
meantime, JP, in the meantime, I think there are two questions that have been raised so far. Balaji is actually asking if there is any specific method to change the manager's attitude. I mean, he means that if there are any techniques which will help them to understand.
Sure. Yes, there is this concept called leadership agility, which talk about a leader. So basically, any manager or any leadership role, and there are certain qualities about how do you become an agile leader. That means how do you bring in agility in your own leadership, and a lot of it is related to again knowing about self, knowing about his or her own leadership styles and things like that. And that can be definitely used, and that is being used by various senior managers and senior leaders and executives in various agile organizations who are trying to use agile practices. So the
last question from Nishchit. That's is emotional intelligence a key for people management? What is your say? What are your thoughts?
Okay. Yes, that's an interesting point. So people are not just talking about IQ now; they're talking about EQ, emotional quotient. Yeah. So rather than emotional intelligence, I would like to call it as emotional quotient, EQ instead of IQ, because emotional quotient is a result of your emotional intelligence, which is nothing but intelligence about the people you work with, right? And nothing else, no other magic there, apart from your subject matter expertise and technical skills and things like that. So definitely that has got a significant role, and that is what is related to the concept of leadership agility I talked about a few minutes back.
Well, I think JP, with this we can end our session today. So thank you so much, JP, for the session, and thank you, listeners, for being there tonight with us. I know